breaking news right now, that House hearing happening right now on the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. We've been mentioning all morning is getting underway. Congressman McCall speaking live. Let's dip in for a bit.
I would like to honor the 13 service members who died at Abbey Gate, that tragic day. Staff Sergeant Darren Hoover, Sergeant Yohani Rosario, Sergeant Nicole Gee, Corporal Hunter Lopez, Corporal Dagan W. Page, Corporal Humberto Sanchez, Lance Corporal David Espinoza, Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, Lance Corporal Riley McCollum, Lance Corporal Dylan Marola, Lance Corporal Kareem Nikoy, Petty Officer 3rd Class Maxton Soviak, and Staff Sergeant Ryan Noss. Can we please have a moment of silence to honor the memory of these fallen heroes and all of the fallen heroes in the Afghan conflict? May God bless them, and God bless their family, and God bless the United States of America. And with that, I turn to our ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me begin my remarks by thanking all of the witnesses for appearing before the committee today, and to thank those who served in our armed services for your service to our great country. I want to particularly recognize Specialist Gunderson and Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews, two of the witnesses on the panel today who were deployed to Hamid Karazi International Airport to assist with the non-combatant evacuation operation during August 2021. Gentlemen, I can only imagine the pressure that so many of you faced during the evacuation operation, which allowed for us to facilitate the evacuation of over 100,000 people. Specialist Gunderson, in your written statement, you write, "No amount of mental preparation or military training could have prepared me for Abbey Gate." I was struck by that statement and the description in your testimony. What an incredible weight and responsibility. I could only imagine what's that like. It brings up for me the emotion that I have felt when I hear from veterans of the war in Afghanistan describe their experiences, both in Afghanistan and upon their return home, many of whom I've met that comes from my district, where I was told of repeated deployments and the separation from their families, watching fellow soldiers suffer from injury or the trauma of seeing them die. The difficulty of returning home and reintegrating back into their home life, tough. The heartbreak of our Gold Star families having to face empty seats during the holidays. So I honor all of your service And it underscores to me that the President of the United States made the right decision to bring all our troops home, because I can't in good conscience imagine sending more American men and women to fight in Afghanistan. We are here today to examine the emergency evacuation from Afghanistan in August 2021 and the administration's broader relocation efforts. It is often said it is easier to start a war than to end it. The war in Afghanistan is no different. This war, that began as an effort to decimate al-Qaeda, ballooned into a nation-building exercise that lasted across 4 administrations and saw more than 800,000 U.S. service members deployed. And yes, the tragic deaths of over 2,461 Americans, including the 13 killed during the evacuation operation. And while the U.S. government planned for a wide range of contingencies, the worst possible scenario happened. Despite repeated assurances, some right here in the capital of the United States, of Afghan President Ghani, he fled the country. And the Afghan government and security forces collapsed faster than expected, and before the withdrawal of our military had been completed. Despite the harsh realities on the ground, a lingering ISIS threat, and heightened uncertainty as the Taliban took control, our diplomats, military, and intelligence professionals facilitated an unprecedented and heroic evacuation never seen before. We worked with more than 24 countries to evacuate American citizens and lawful permanent residents to relocate Afghans who had helped us, citizens of our allies and partners, and at-risk Afghans to the United States or transit locations across the globe. In the end, more than 120,000 people were evacuated to safety under some of the most difficult conditions imaginable. It was in a complex and dangerous environment, thousands of miles away. And so I commend our brave U.S. military and civilian personnel working closely with so many civil society organizations and everyday Americans for achieving this. But while the historic Afghanistan airlift brought many people to safety, we must acknowledge that there were mistakes along the way. And as a result, many Afghans who supported the American war effort over the past 20 years continue to seek pathways to immigrate to the United States. As in most things, context matters. The evacuation did not happen in a vacuum. A culmination of policy decisions informed and influenced the events of August 2021 and continue to shape how we navigate ongoing relocation and diplomatic efforts today. In the years preceding the 2021 withdrawal, the decision to engage in the direct negotiations with the Taliban at the exclusion of the Afghan government and the invitation to meet at Camp David conferred international legitimacy to the Taliban. The deal that derived from these negotiations required the withdrawal of our forces without forcing the Taliban to fulfill any real commitments or separating from al-Qaeda, on agreeing to a ceasefire, or on negotiating with the Afghan government. I called in the last Congress this precipitous U.S. troop drawdowns were ordered throughout 2020 without regard to the Taliban's compliance with the deal. This same deal forced the Afghan government to release 5,000 Taliban fighters, severely altering the power and structure of the country. Meanwhile, U.S. immigration mechanisms available to our Afghan allies face long-standing challenges. The SIV program for Iraq and Afghanistan, established in 2006, statutorily capped participants at 50 per year. In 2027 and 2008, it capped this number at 500. Though the caps on SIVs grew over the years, they did not comport with the numbers of Afghans who would have qualified. Separate from the legislative limitations placed on the SIV programs, executive branch agencies processing and vetting SIV applications were also time-consuming and resource-challenged. On top of that, the previous administration actively undermined U.S. immigration refugee admissions and mechanisms, and specifically paused the processing of special immigrant visas applications entirely in 2020, creating a backlog more than 17,000 applications. In fact, at the start of the current administration, there had not been a single interview of an SIV applicant going back to March of 2020. In total, these policy decisions not only altered the balance of power and reduced U.S. leverage in Afghanistan, but created incredibly difficult circumstances as we work to bring allies to safety and the U.S. war in Afghanistan to a close. So despite these challenges, the Biden administration took decisive steps to honor its promises to the Afghans that have stood with us by restarting the SIV interview process, speeding up the SIV processing, and surging additional consular officers, adjudicators, and other personnel to restart the program. The administration also worked to repair the institutional damage done to the U.S. refugee admissions program and established priority referral categories for Afghans within. So, as I conclude, we must acknowledge this important effort to relocate vulnerable Afghans, and it is ongoing, and that this administration is actively working to help those still in Afghanistan safely leave the country. But the evacuation and relocation process are not without faults, many of which will require decisive action and legislation from the U.S. Congress, not only our executive branch agencies or the White House. We are here to understand the full context around Afghan evacuations and ongoing relocations so that we can streamline the process and make necessary improvements to fulfill our promises to our Afghan allies going forward. We must further enhance cooperation and communication with the wide array of civil society stakeholders and everyday Americans, like our witnesses who are here today, who have dedicated significant time and resources to this effort. So I fully support, Mr. Chairman, bipartisan oversight as we focus on solutions to safely relocate those deserving Afghans and address the broader challenges to our SIV and refugee assistance programs. Our country has paid a great cost during the war in Afghanistan. Our aim then should not be simply to score political points here today, but to rather focus on real solutions that will help real people. That is the best way to honor the sacrifices of so many Americans who served in or supported our interests in Afghanistan over the last 20 years, especially and including our witnesses here today. So I look forward to their testimony, and I yield back my time.
I thank the ranking member who yields back. And I, too, am committed to those who were left behind and are still left behind. We need to get them out. We need to get them the hell out of there. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We're pleased to have a very distinguished group of heroes before us. France Hong is a national security professional with over 20 years of experience. Graduate of West Point, he served at the White House before becoming the executive officer of an Army Special Forces company in Afghanistan in 2009. Currently, he serves as the executive chairman of Allied Airlift 21, one of the volunteer organizations set up to help get people safely out of Afghanistan. To date, Allied Airlift 21 has helped over 500 individuals evacuate the country. Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews has served in the United States Marine Corps For 5.5 years, he and his sniper team were deployed to Kabul airport in 2021 to assist with the evacuation. They were stationed at Abbey Gate as the primary ground reconnaissance and observation asset. While there, they helped evacuate over 200 U.S. nationals. Sergeant Vargas Andrews was gravely wounded at the bombing at Abbey Gate on August 26, 2021. As a result, he lost multiple organs, 2 of his limbs, and suffered numerous other injuries. He's had 44 surgeries to date. He is appearing in his personal capacity, and his testimony does not represent the views or opinions of the Department of Defense or U.S. Marine Corps. Ms. Camille Mackler is the Executive Director of the Immigrant Advocates Response Collaborative, also known as Immigrant ARC, which she helped form and has led since February 2017. Peter Lucier is a Marine veteran and a recent graduate of the St. Louis University School of Law. He currently serves as the lead for strategic partnerships and allied organizations for Team America Relief, a member organization of the Afghan Evac Coalition. Since August of 2021, Team America Relief has assisted thousands of Afghans as well as American citizens in connecting the resources to assist in relocation and safe passage out of Afghanistan. Former Specialist Aidan Gunderson served 4 years with the 82nd Airborne Division as a combat medic. Before leaving the military in July 2022, he was deployed from August 14th to August 30th of 2021 in Afghanistan, where he assisted with the evacuation. Aidan and his company also evacuated over 200 trusted civilians through Operation Pineapple Express. And finally, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, former Green Beret, served multiple tours in Afghanistan, founded Task Force Pineapple, a volunteer organization set up to help get people safely out of Afghanistan. Task Force Pineapple has successfully evacuated around 1,000 Afghan allies to date. I want to thank all of you for being here today. Your full statements will be made part of the record. And I now recognize Mr. Hong for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Meeks, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me here today to testify as just one of thousands of Americans who volunteered to help those left behind in Afghanistan. My name is France Hong. In August 2008, I was an associate counsel to the president, working in the White House as a lawyer. 1 year later, I was a captain deployed to Afghanistan as the executive officer of a U.S. Army Special Forces company. Every day that I served in Afghanistan, Afghan allies like Jabbar, pictured here, an Afghan security guard, stood bravely beside me. Like tens of thousands of other Afghans who chose to support our mission, Jabbar was branded a traitor by the Taliban and targeted for reprisals. Afghans like Jabbar put their lives and the lives of their families in jeopardy for us and for our mission. Recognizing this, those of us who served in Afghanistan and our nation as a whole made a solemn promise to stand by them. For over 160,000 Afghans, our nation has failed to live up to this promise. A number of Afghan allies have come to the United States, but over 80% of the Afghans who stood by us at great risk to themselves and their families remain left behind. In August 2021, during the rushed and chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, I and thousands of others received frantic pleas for help from our Afghan allies whose lives were in peril. Driven by a desire to save those who had stood shoulder to shoulder with us, we did what we could from half a world away. Working from our homes and using every digital tool at our disposal, thousands of us guided tired and scared Afghan families through crowds and Taliban checkpoints. The weight of this work was crushing. We left jobs, drained savings, reopened old wounds. We looked in horror as our screens filled with images of violence and desperation outside the gates of Kabul airport. We wept as we listened to messages left by children pleading for our help. 9 times out of 10, our efforts failed. But every success was a family saved, a promise kept. Hundreds of volunteer groups, including Allied Airlift 21, were responsible for getting thousands of people into Kabul airport and safety. But the work wasn't done. On August 27th, when the gates of Kabul airport closed to our allies, Allied Airlift 21, several private companies, and other volunteer groups organized a desperate, all-day, 200-mile journey for 6 buses filled with Afghan allies and Americans through Taliban-controlled territory to the city of Mazar-e-Sharif. This treacherous journey included an attempted busjacking and the birth of a baby on board one of the buses. Our group eventually got 400 Afghan allies and Americans to Mazar, where we hoped to charter a flight to safety. We spent the next 3 weeks hiding these 400 people from the Taliban, keeping them alive with the generosity of American donors. On September 17, 2021, a privately chartered plane lifted into the skies above Afghanistan with 380 souls on board, including 128 Americans, 152 children, and 1 newborn baby. All 380 passengers are now in America, alive and free, including Jabbar, his wife, and their 8 children. My passion for helping our Afghan allies comes from a deeply personal place. You see, nearly 50 years ago, I was one of those rescued children. On April 23, 1975, my family was evacuated by American forces from Saigon. Weeks earlier, President Ford proclaimed that America had a profound moral obligation to its Vietnamese allies. He and Congress then followed those words with action, rising above political differences to evacuate and resettle 130,000 Vietnamese allies. Because of their tremendous political will and courage, I am alive and free today. I've been blessed with the opportunities that only America provides, and grew up inspired by the sure knowledge that America stood by me and many like me. That led me to apply to West Point, then serve in the U.S. Army, and eventually help organize a flight that saved 152 children who will now grow up knowing that America stood by them and their families. We often talk.
All right, you're listening right now. Again,
about
breaking
America
news,
as a shining
major
city
moment
on a hill.
right now. This is the first hearing on that botched Afghanistan withdrawal, and you're hearing testimony, and there are many sticking points to get to in that. One of the ones you're hearing is a personal experience about many of the Afghan refugees that the United States has been trying to assist in getting back over to the States, translators that were there through that 20-year war in Afghanistan.
Yeah, the first-hand accounts are what's really powerful. Again, having that personal relationship with an Afghan translator. And then, of course, this all will eventually lead up to the withdrawal as Francois was making his way through the opening statement there.